Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. We often lament that matters like economy are not talked about enough when it comes to politics in India. Media is often blamed for not focusing on the issues that matter. Now, I won't get into whether that lament is fair, but certainly right now, ahead of 2024 elections, there can be no criticism on both of these counts. Interestingly, it is the government of the day itself that is pushing its economic agenda into prime time. The Modi government had announced its intention of releasing a white paper on its handling of the economy, not just for the last 5 years, but all of 10 years, and reiterated that during this year's budget. They particularly want to compare it with the previous 10 years of the UPA. Now, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has released this 54-page document just a short while ago. Long story short, they've talked about how an economy down on fundamentals was brought out of distress while also producing record performances on infrastructure and beneficiary schemes. Interestingly, it is the Congress today that is criticizing this move, calling it a political gimmick. They have brought their own black paper to counter this though. But should the opposition not be welcoming this exercise? Should not all governments be expected to do this once every 5 years? And who is more comfortable on the issue of economy today? Can this be the 2024 decider? We take that question to our guests in just a bit. Let me first break down with some of the highlights of the 54-page report. These are, of course, the salient features. The government talks about how India has moved from a fragile 5 economy to a top 5 economy now. There has been double-digit inflation in the past that has been brought down to little over 5%. Inflation is one of those things that they're criticized about, but actually they're wearing it on their sleeves. Record foreign exchange reserves of $620 plus billion now. From 2G scams to 3 lakh crore revenue of telecom service providers. Resources divulged to states. Now this one is crucial because this is in news. Is 3.8 times higher than earlier. Pace of national highway construction is 2.3 times higher than 2014. Let me break down some of the more macroeconomics fundamentals that the government has talked about in this white paper. This is the comparison year on year for real GDP growth, for example. So 5.5 is what the government says was in 2012-2013. Now it is at 9.1%. This figure is from 2021 to 2022. Headline inflation reduced from 9.9 during UPA years, end years, to 5.5% from 2021 to 2022. Current account balance as a percentage of GDP was negative 4.8% under the UPA, and it has been brought under control to negative 1.2%. Let's also take a look at the improvement in physical infrastructure under the NDA from 2015 to 2023. On parameters like national highways in kilometers, cargo traffic in million tons, electrified rail route in kilometers, number of airports, they have sought to present how the pace of infrastructure has really moved faster in the last 10 years than what it used to be earlier. Now, possibly the marker on which this government can claim an upper hand is the delivery of some of their largest flagship schemes as well. So let me break down those parameters as well, like affordable housing in the rural areas, rural electrification. The NDA is ahead of the UPA, although here the UPA could argue that it's only a marginal difference. But construction of toilets, now that has been a bumper performance of the NDA government. There is a visible difference on the ground, and this is one of those things that you can't argue. Pension or affordable pension for those in the unorganized sector has increased massively from 36.4 lakhs to 6.1 crores is what the NDA Modi government data is saying. Now, Congress did release a black paper this morning against the Modi government. That document titled 10 Saal Anyay Kal claimed that the Modi government's 10 years have wreaked havoc on the country's economy. They raked up crimes against women and social injustice as well. But let me just bring to you how Congress has painted a picture on what has been their pet topic, which is inflation. So they have sought to bring to notice how LPG cylinders, petrol, diesel, mustard oil, atta, milk, day-to-day essentials that any person needs, any household needs. On all of those parameters, prices have gone up. LPG cylinder price has gone up 120%. Rest hover about in the 30 to 70% area. So with that, you have a brief analysis of what each government is talking about or what the opposition today is talking about versus the current government. The big question we ask with our guests is this: with this economy white paper, can these issues be the decider for 2024? I want to go across to our guests joining us. Vinita Hariharan is spokesperson of the BJP. Bhavya Narsimhamurthy is from the Congress party. I'm also joined by Prasenjit K. Basu, Chief Economist, ICICI Securities and author. Sanjeev Srivastava, Senior Journalist, is also with us. Let me begin with Bhavya from the Congress party. The government has, not for the first time, but even in this white paper, painted a picture that the economy was down in the dumps. It's not just the fact that there was policy paralysis, but there was also the specter of scams. There was also weak economic handling through the global financial crisis. And to maintain certain numbers that looked good, the UPA did great disservice to the fundamentals on many other counts, including infrastructure or expenditure on infrastructure, expenditure on consumption versus what they should have really focused on. Your first reactions to the government's white paper? Bhavya. Bhavya, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Do you heard my question? If so, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So, the very fact that they had to release a white paper after 10 years of their rule, comparing their performance with our performance previously, shows their desperation.
Why is this desperation?
That's because we are exposing them when it comes to people. What's affecting them actually is inflation. What's affecting the youth of this country is unemployment. That's the reality of the ground today. And the safety of women. And the atrocities on OBCs and SCSTs. That is the reality of India today. But they want to deviate that. The only thing they can do is by maligning the opposition, the Congress. If you remember, the response to the motion of thanks of Prime Minister was about Congress and not about the country and the problems country is facing. Or, his response to Manipur, zero. His response to the wrestlers' complaint, zero. All he cares about is maligning the Congress party, because to cover up their inefficiency, all they can do is malign the opposition party.
But Bhavya, can I just come in? Can I just come in? 1 second. Can I just come in 1 second? I thought you would welcome this. Why is the Congress party not welcoming the fact that the government of the day wants to talk about its economic performance? I thought this is the issues that you thought were the real issues of the day.
Still the real issues of what we are considering. These are the real issues.
Yes.
That's exactly why we have released our black paper. That is the real issue.
Yes, so can you respond to the white paper the government has released? Now, you keep talking about inflation. The government has presented a chart of inflation trend in UPA years. Now, unless it is your contention that this chart is wrong, you have to respond to the fact that you keep claiming that inflation is worse under the NDA when the figures prove otherwise. From financial year 04, 3.9% inflation to 9.4 in financial year 14, during which it touched 12.3 in financial year 2010 to hovering to about 6% now. On what basis are you criticizing inflation control?
When you compare inflation of two different times, 10 years ago and today, and what this inflation is based on, one thing, and they even are speaking about 2008 recession. I think that has been a historical time when then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh made sure it did not affect Indian economy like it affected other countries. That was one of
Actually, there is a chart here on how much India was affected because of the global financial crisis. Since you mentioned it, I just want to bring it to the notice. Out of emerging economies, Brazil in 2008 was affected, score was 5.1. By 2009, it became minus zero point 0.1. China 9.6 in 2008 when the crisis first hit, 9.4 in 2009. India 3.9 in 2008, 8.5 in 2009. So by what parameter are we to judge how well the government handled the financial crisis?
See, there is inflation. Every country is different, right? What the parameters here, the population here is totally different from Brazil on one point. And when it comes to inflation, how? Yes, inflation is calculated based on various parameters. But when you compare the actual things that affect people on a daily basis, the middle class and the lower middle class and the BPL, that is what is affecting the people of India.
Okay, can I invite Vinita ji of the BJP to respond to that? The numbers on inflation, one second ma'am, Bhavya ji, the numbers on inflation, Vinita, do not quite tell the crisis that the public may be facing. This is the contention. Yes, Prasanjit, I'll come to you. This is the contention I've heard many times, that actually people are in distress. And that distress is somehow not captured either in numbers of fundamentals of the economy or in the mood of the voter. Please respond to this.
No, I would say this is a democracy of the people, by the people, for the people. So the recent election results in the three states, the biggest states in the country, proves for itself the voter sentiment and the people sentiment and their acceptance of all the programs and policies that we are bringing to the ground. And it's not just on paper, we have proved it beyond doubt. We have proved it on the ground. We keep traveling to the states. We travel to communities. I've just come back from a nationwide tour through Jharkhand, Tamil Nadu, and Maharashtra, and we have heard beneficiaries speak highly about the programs.
But
that the Modi
Congress has also won state elections during this period in Telangana, in Karnataka. So, is that the barometer that you're going by?
No, that is one of the parameters. So the kind of elections that we have won, and the Congress has won it on false planks of guarantees and electoral guarantees, which they've already failed to deliver on the ground. So what I'm talking about is the actual delivery on the ground, which we have seen. We've heard it from the people. As you see, that it's not just the statistics of the white paper. If you can't believe the white paper, which is being backed by statistics, heavily backed by data and statistics. I was just going through the 59-page report. I think all kudos to the finance minister and all the bureaucrats who prepared this white paper, an absolutely brilliant white paper. I think the Congress is speechless now because they have nothing to counter this. The black paper which they have brought out is actually shows desperation on their behalf. It is quickly stitched up a black paper just before the white paper. That itself shows their kind of puerile way of reacting to.
I'll come back to how much the government is confident of how much of this is going to matter in the elections. But yes, Prasanjit Basu, you wanted to come in.
Well, I think the economic numbers, this is of course an economic issue that that we are addressing, and the data is quite clear. If you look at inflation, which is the parameter that the Congress spokesman was talking about, inflation in the second UPA term averaged a little over 10% annually for 5 years. Food inflation, which actually affects the vast majority of India's people, averaged 12.2% a year for that 5-year period. Now, it's quite interesting that even in the last 3 months before the Modi government came into power, the inflation rate was 8.6%, averaging 8.6% in the last 3 months before the Modi government took over. From June 2014 onwards, inflation in India has never in any month exceeded 7.4%. And it has averaged 5% for the entire period of nearly the last 10 years. So on the inflation front, there is no question that the performance of the current government has been substantially better than the previous government. Now let's look at the current account. The current account was in surplus when the Vajpayee government fell. The last 3 years of the Vajpayee government resulted in current account surpluses. That went from a current account surplus of 2.4% of GDP in FY 2004 to a deficit of 4.9% of GDP in FY 2013. So there's a very sharp widening in the current account, which actually makes the country very vulnerable. When you have a large current account deficit, funding it becomes problematic, And that is why India was part of the fragile five economies, both during the 2011 and 2013 currency crises that hit the emerging markets. Now, by contrast, the current account has deficit during the Modi years has averaged about 1.6% of GDP. Currently, it is at 1% of GDP in the latest 12 months, and so the current account performance has been substantially better. And in the year of the COVID crisis, India actually had a current account surplus, the first current account surplus since the Vajpayee years.
Can I just come in?
Economic growth, the numbers are like this.
One of the criticisms...
Sure, I mean, I'm just with one last point on growth.
Yeah.
Growth during the first Modi term, 5 years of the first Modi term, 2014 to 2019, average annual real GDP growth in India was 7.4%. That is the fastest economic growth by any government during a full prime ministerial term since independence, by far the best. The second best is 2004 to 2009. So the first Manmohan Singh term is the second best performance. But the Modi performance is substantially better.
Is bigger. And actually, it's
Then, of
interesting
course, we
you're
had the
drawing that
COVID
comparison between UPA 1 and UPA 2. Some of their staunchest supporters would concede that it is UPA 2 that was a particularly problematic period, because it was also one, as the government in its white paper tries to, has colored, one riddled with scam, with policy paralysis, to the extent that defense procurement was not taking place. There were no coastal areas being developed. All of that is in the white paper. But Prasenjit Basu, before I bring in Sanjeev also, one of the criticisms is that you can have high growth percentage as far as GDP is concerned, but per capita growth in India has not increased at the same rate. So actually the benefit to the common person is not comparable.
So thank you very much.
Per capita income has grown faster.
Sanjeev,
because-
I'm really
what
sorry.
Prasenjit was just
you know,
saying about...
Sanjeev, I'm really sorry. I just want Prasenjit, the economist, to just tell us what his view in that is, and then you can come in. I'm really sorry for that.
Yeah. So you see now, India's population growth rate has decelerated over time. In the last few years, population is growing at about 1.2, 1.3% a year. A decade ago, it was growing around 1.8% a year. So if your economy in real terms, real GDP is growing faster and your population is growing slower, then in fact, real GDP growth is substantially faster, is even faster. So in fact, the last 9 years have been the fastest period of per capita income growth in our history. Raghuram Rajan's book, for instance, says that in the latest book, says that we are growing per capita. If we grow per capita income at 4% a year, we won't be that wealthy. We'll only be $12,000 or so in 2047. But in fact, per capita income is growing well over 6% a year. In fact, in the last 2.5 years, per capita income has grown nearly 8% a year. So if you have that sort of average annual pace, now I don't think 8% per capita income growth, per capita GDP growth is going to be sustainable.
Yeah, no,
but even if it grows at 7% a year, it doubles per capita income. That is the average income of every person in the country doubles every 10 years. And that is essentially the pace that we are now on, and that is something to be lauded. Now, my point is that India's growth has accelerated steadily over time. This time around, inflation is low, current account is in good shape, and therefore the grounds exist for an acceleration of growth to continue.
In the government's charts that they have given today, GDP per capita, PPP, dollar inflation adjusted according to the World Bank, 3,889 then and 6,016 now. Average per capita GDP between 0514 and 15 to 23. The government has said, Sanjeev, that actually real income has doubled for Indians. It's a figure that many would contest. They would argue they've not really seen those impacts around their life.
It hasn't doubled for me. So I was just saying, Shivani, has it doubled for you or for me or anybody we know really? Unless those who are really wise investors in the stock markets, I don't know for who, which salaried class or working class income has doubled. So, with all respects, I think that's some kind of a fallacy, or maybe it is true. I'm not a man of numbers. So, and I'm not disputing right away what the government is saying is wrong. See, these numbers, and we all know, and everybody, that numbers can be a really double-edged thing. They can be played both ways. The first thing which came to my mind, and I'm an admirer of this government's economic policies, I come with that disclaimer. But the first thing which came to my mind was that why is this comparison between 2013, 14 and 21, 22? Is 21, 22 the best year that the NDA government can project? I don't know. I'm just asking a question.
Maybe because that's the last financial year we have very solid numbers for.
Yeah, so maybe those were the best numbers.
No, not best, not solid in terms of best, in the sense that all books have been ratified, they're all final numbers.
That may be, that very well may be the case. But I think the headline story on inflation, I think what the BJP spokesperson or Prasenjit is saying, I completely agree. I think inflation is, everybody wants to and loves to talk about Mehngai, but inflation is kind of okay. Overall distress also I don't find so much, because while I say nobody I know has income has doubled, at the same time I also don't know of anyone whose life is in distress. And that has been a continuous evolving process of the India story. Not just NDA years, even UPA years. People are coming out of distress over decades. So that is one good thing. But the real underlying, I think the big story which this white paper is not talking about is the unemployment. Their government data only shows that India is now going through a phase of record unemployment. The kind of unemployment we have never seen before.
Which data are you talking about? I talked to government people, even in the finance ministry. First of all, that CMI data from 2017, which talked about a 40-year high in unemployment, they discounted. They say we don't trust these numbers. So which data are you talking about?
So, well, if they don't trust, so if the government decides which numbers they want to trust and which numbers they don't want to trust.
That
CMI is not government, by the way.
The CMI is not a government number. It's an external agency, and the government denies that
private surveyor.
That it is very difficult to get employment. Graduates, postgraduates, engineers, the numbers are just going up, and it's not. And I don't envy the government's position.
So you're saying unemployment is that big issue?
For Rahul Gandhi to be on a road show or a Nyaya Yatra and talk that he'll give millions of employment, but there is no employment. As we go for more automation, more sophistication, the numbers of jobs is a problem. Where do they come from?
So you're saying that the one criteria on which the government could be pressed on is unemployment, and maybe the evergreen subjects of inflation should be put aside, because that's actually not the reality, both in numbers or on ground.
I would like to
no, but Sajiv, I have a counter question. I have a counter question on unemployment. Now, this unemployment question has been asked ad nauseum to the government for the last 2 years, particularly post-COVID, and there's no denying there was distress during COVID. The government, one, maintains that actually they avoided people slipping into poverty during COVID. There's I think the IMF report on that. Whether you want to believe it or not, I leave it to the audiences. But for example, the government says capital expenditure from 1.7 to 3.2, number of startups from 350 to 1,17,000. They would talk about mudra loans. They would talk about, everything else. They're saying that the pattern of jobs is changing. It's not necessarily that people don't have work. Your response first, then Congress can respond.
I'll just say one more sentence.
Yeah.
That all these numbers are great. They sound great, they look great. But the government's own numbers say they are giving free rations to 80 crore people. If we were such a happy, booming, great economy, out of 140 crore, if you have to provide free rations to 80 crore people, so there are gaps.
Okay,
and I would ask both the government and the opposition to appreciate what is good and accept what is wrong.
Okay.
See, what is the problem? Why just this has to be a me versus you debate always?
Yes. Vinita, 30 seconds, and Bhavya, Prasenjit, I'll come to you in the end. Yes. Vinita, 30 seconds. You are providing free food to 80 crore people. That should not be worn as a badge of honor. That means you have to protect that many people.
No, see, we can't get away with subsidies overnight.
No, this is a subsidy introduced. No. This is not a normal subsidy. This is a subsidy introduced for COVID, then continued much beyond COVID.
Yes, we are continuing with the focus. It is a conscious attempt to bring people out of poverty. We've brought out about 35 crore people out of poverty. So we are not a nation that is absolutely, we're not a developed nation as yet. We are going to Viksit Bharat by 2047. We cannot, completely cripple the, people, the poor. All of a sudden, we cannot remove all the support that we're giving. So while we are having market economy, we'll also continue with welfare economy, and at a certain point of time, when the people are empowered enough, we will withdraw the welfare economic measures that we're bringing
Okay.
to people.
Bhavya,
So
30
I think
seconds.
that's how
Bhavya.
it has to be seen.
Yeah, previously what the BJP spokesperson said that Congress is desperate to release this black paper. Ma'am, this is a job. This is our duty as an opposition to expose the inefficiency and maladministration of the ruling government. But your duty is not to act as an opposition party. You are far beyond that. Now, you were an opposition party 10 years ago. You are in ruling government now. Why are you criticizing us? Show us your achievements. Ask votes based on your achievements. To talk about economy 10 years ago, just
We
to
have
show
the
the
white
numbers
paper
that you are
completely talks
convenient
about
with,
our
that
achievements and not
only that
about
you
your.
will accept only your numbers, which is convenient for you, is not acceptable. And please behave like ruling party, not as an opposition party. You were opposition 10 years ago. Now you are not in opposition to speak about our
Okay, but
government.
Bhavya,
But
can I
you
come
will
in?
have
One
job to
second,
speak
Bhavya.
about
To
the
be
ruling party.
honest, when you only present the numbers from now, the criticism has been, but under UPA it was this. So I think the government is doing. I think it's not really that they're harping to the past. They're just giving you a comparison so that two
I'm not
governments'
just saying
comparisons can
about
be
now.
compared.
You know, Shivani, I'm not just speaking about now.
Huh.
Any problem with the country, Mr. Modi directly attributes that to Nehru,
Huh.
if you know that.
Huh.
Right? Like they're not behaving like opposition now.
Okay.
They're
So you're
constantly
saying
been in
beyond
opposition
economics,
for
they
the
have a
past 10 years.
tendency to
So this
blame
is not
the
just
Congress
about
party.
now. I'm just
Okay.
speaking in general that they should behave like a ruling party and not like
Okay,
opposition
I've
party.
got limited time. 30 seconds to Prasenjit Basu. At least it is good, Mr. Basu, that we're discussing the economy, the state of the economy. Because for years I have heard we don't do this enough.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it's also worth just pointing out that the free food scheme is massive, but it is fiscally affordable. The interesting thing is that the fiscal deficit has continued to come down in India. This compares with a global situation where almost every country in the world, from the United States to the UK to most of the European Union, China, everybody has blown their public debt numbers out of the water during the COVID period. They've all got massive fiscal deficits. India's fiscal deficit is on a glide path towards 4.5% in 2 years. That is a remarkable achievement. So,
Okay.
the fiscal management has been really good.
Yeah, actually, you
And
make a good point.
What is also
Other
important to
countries gave out
understand
goals
is that
in other ways.
there's
India managed
universalization
its
of
COVID
access
financial
to
issues
bank
much
accounts.
better. Sorry, I'm cutting you short. Prasenjit Basu and all the other panelists, thanks a lot for joining us. That's all the time we have.